Oh, geez, I didn't even realize it recorded. Okay, here we go. I always get a little nervous when we do a live stream. I don't know why, Brian. It's like
Yeah.
we've been doing this so long. I don't know why I get nervous, but I still get a little nervous, you
Yeah,
know?
it's just making sure all the boxes are checked and everything beforehand. And
And with the streaming, it's so like let's see if everybody's here. Can everybody see us? Give us some thumbs up here in the right in the chat. Right, put a Q&A, put something. Yeah, there we go.
there you go.
We got some people here. Okay. All right, everybody. Nice to see everybody. We got people joining us live. We have people from social in the app, live streaming. Gosh, we're going everywhere right now. So today was a big day, Brian. Shall we tell people what happened today?
Yeah, because I saw a little bit. I just kind of saw the picture of the guidelines, but I heard there's some very interesting language in the writing of it. So
Yeah, so all right, guys. If you don't all know, I'm going to share my screen real quick so you guys can see. So let's see. Can you guys see the screen here? Give me a thumbs up if you all can see the screen.
I just
So
popped
this
up.
is yeah, this is or you can go to the Toward Health app. On the Toward Health app, we have the dietary guidelines posted there. So you can go to the App Store, go to Toward Health, and go to Toward Health app. And in the announcements, we have the new dietary guidelines. The PDF is listed there. But if you're on social, if you're joining us from social, this is the picture of the new dietary guidelines. And there's good and there's bad here. But it's a huge improvement. It's a huge improvement. And this is what was announced today with the heads of the FDA, CMS, USDA, and HHS. And this was done at the White House. I'll be in DC tomorrow, and I'll be at the HHS Humphreys Hall, and to discuss this a little bit further. But we're very excited about this. I think I gave you all, everybody who's here, a little teaser of what's to come. But they're definitely turned things upside down. And honestly, it's about time, Brian. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah,
In 2009 when you started, or 2000, was it 2007 or 2009 when you started Atkins?
2009.
2009. Wouldn't you have been happy to see a picture like this? What you now know to be the truth, and what we all know to be the truth, that metabolic health is improved with carbohydrate restriction and, promoting healthy fats and, healthy fats and animal-based proteins and fats. I mean, wouldn't you have liked to see this?
Definitely, because like I mentioned earlier, when I started this, and even before when I struggled with my weight most of the time, this was actually flipped the other way.
Guys, can you write in the chat for us? Write in the chat for us if you knew about this. One, can you write in the chat if you knew, like if you knew about this, or if this is news to you, or if you're just finding out now, or you heard about it before? Just write in the chat like, I just found out, or I saw already. I'm curious to see. Diana heard about it. Well, Dan, you have an early scoop. I saw it earlier in the app. Saw it on X already. Good. Okay. Saw it on Facebook. I'm happy you all saw on the news. Yeah. Well, somebody gave it to you all first. Just remember that one. Saw it on X. Okay. Just found out. So, this is a big deal. This is a big deal, guys. This is a big deal. I think, you know, what happened was when the new administration came in, they said we want to get rid of any scientist on the DGA with a conflict of interest. And when they did that, there was nobody left. So they put together a, 6-page document. You can see it on the Toward Health app. And this pyramid is essentially a good guide. There's a lot of good there. It specifically says if you have chronic disease, a low carb diet is beneficial, meaning hypertension, obesity, diabetes. If you have chronic disease, this is helpful. And so we're very happy about this. We're very happy about this. What we hope, and what I'm going to say tomorrow, when when I meet members of the administration is we have to put a scientific process around this because we can't just go back when, a new administration that's plant-based or whatever takes over. We can't just, we have to be science-based. So my push in this administration is let's create a process to make the science-based because they still, kept the saturated fat cap, which at 10%, which what that means is, they're still saying we're not clear about saturated fat, and they made it clear. They said we need more research, which I was happy to see. At least they caveated it that way. But it namely calls out sugar and processed carbs. It says you got to lower it. It says if you have a chronic disease, excuse me, that you should consider a low carb diet, something that Brian has been saying for 18 years and I've been saying for nearly 10 years. So, and a lot of my patients who are here, they've heard this message before, and I'm happy and honored to be able to bring that to you and to also influence everybody, influence this administration, and influence. This is going to protect a lot of kids, a lot of adolescents. The pediatric fatty liver epidemic, we're seeing the pediatric diabetes epidemic, the adult, obesity diabetes epidemics we're seeing. I really think this is going to make a huge impact, and I'm really, really happy about it. So if you have questions about this, um, you can put them in the chat, and when we get to the end of this talk, we can answer some of them. I'm happy to take questions on it. But with that said, hopefully you all did the homework assignment, Brian. I don't know. We're gonna call them out now if they did the
Yeah,
homework assignment.
that's kind of a lot to do on a short notice, but I'm sure some of them did it.
Well, we're gonna find out, Brian. We're gonna find out. I'm excited about this talk. I'll shut my screen off and I'll try to keep quiet, Brian, but I'll definitely be looking at the chat during your talk.
All right, man, appreciate it. All right, guys, bear with me. I'm going to, yeah, somebody give me a thumbs up that the slideshow popped up. All right, great. So definitely, I want to glad to see everyone come back for the second day of getting started with keto and carnivore. Again, just like yesterday, we're going to be going over quite a few things today, and a lot of it's going to be mainly about understanding your hunger and satiety, and we're also going to talk a little bit more about that self-assessment form we talked about yesterday. And we kind of discussed doing this before you got started. And we talked about thinking of your worst case scenarios because it's very important to identify those barriers that could derail you. And you know the way you that way kind of what you need to do and have the things you need in place to keep you on track so you can maintain this lifestyle. And to do that, I'm going to pop down here. To do that, we asked you to assess your problem people, places, times, situations, and foods. And before I go into why, going into great detail is very important to help you prepare for these things. And just a show of hands out there or a thumbs up, who was able to fill out that self-assessment form? All right, I saw a couple pop up in there, but like I said, this is something you definitely want to do before you start. And when you do it, it's best to provide as much detail as you can. And the reason we want you to think of your worst day is because that's when you're going to be at your most vulnerable and the most likely time you're going to make a bad decision. So, when you're motivated and you're in control, it may not take much to get through one of those situations that maybe it's just a little uncomfortable or you don't have to rely on the willpower that long. But, the last thing you want to be doing is relying on willpower because most of the time, the willpower is going to let you down. And once you've thought about those worst case scenarios for your problem people, places, times, situations, and foods, you want to put some defenses in place for them. But before you do, I think it really helps to go into the deep detail on what those really are. So, for example, when you're assessing your problem foods, we're going to go through these one by one. And what I mean by problem foods is what are the foods that you struggle with the most and can't seem to say no to when they're right in front of you? So for example, for me, I could never limit cookies or ice cream. And it didn't matter whatever the size of the package was, that was the serving size to me. And even if I'd ate a huge dinner and I ate until I was completely full, completely stuffed, if someone put these foods in front of me, I would still eat them. So if you have a problem with ice cream, chips, cookies, or anything else for that matter, right? I think one of the first things you want to do is think of what brands of ice cream, chips, and cookies, what flavors, and find some close low carb replacement for those things and put them in place and put them, mainly in the places that you struggle with them. So for places, this could be things like a favorite restaurant that has your favorite foods or a lot of your trigger foods. Maybe it's a family member's house or a friend's house where you feel comfortable, but you're kind of vulnerable to letting your guard down. So places are literally anywhere you could struggle. So think of how to make those places safe before you even get there. And also think of situations. Most of the time, situations, these are always social things like, you know, just recently, we just coming out of the holidays. They're holidays, birthdays, weddings, and other get-togethers that may evolve around like family, friends, or coworkers. And ways to defend against situations and places is pretty similar. So I kind of grouped them both together like that. So some strategies may be as simple as eating before you go. I know that may sound a little strange, but if you fill up before you go, you have a way better chance of making it through that moment than trying to rely on willpower. Um, because willpower, is going to run out on you at some point. And definitely think of places where you don't have many options to choose from, or there won't be very many things there. And in that situation, bring your own options. Um, and if you can research the menus or what's going to be served before you get there, that can help you plan and make that situation a lot better. For problem times, some examples of problem times are: do you eat before dinner or do you eat late at night? Do you find yourself snacking or eating at certain times of the day or certain times of the night, even though you're not hungry? And maybe during or after work or on the weekends is an issue that you have. And so it's very key to assess when, why, and what foods you go after in all these times and put some strategies and foods in place before these times even happen to help you stay on track. For example, have some water, coffee, tea, seltzer in hand at the time you usually struggle. That way you can buy yourself some time while, sipping on it. But, do something away from the kitchen that's relaxing. Like maybe if it's early in the day or still some daylight out, taking a walk, listen to some music, or if you have a hobby, maybe set some time around that area to do that hobby. Because if it's not true hunger, that urge should pass in like 30 to 60 minutes. So it's very key to kind of buy yourself some time. We find getting out of the kitchen, occupying your mind while you're sipping on something is a very good strategy for that. Problem people, this can be anyone that makes it hard to maintain your lifestyle and, maybe gets in the way of your goals. So some examples are maybe it's others in the home who don't eat the same as you. It could be family, friends, or coworkers who like to peer pressure you into to eating or drinking whatever they're eating or drinking. Or maybe there's someone, particular that stresses you out, upsets you, and that can often, trigger you to eat as well. So being aware and identifying these people that's in your lives is why it's important to, cultivate that community and support. And sometimes it's a good idea to reach out to people and let them know what you're doing to improve your health. Many times our family and friends, they're very supportive and willing to accommodate us. It's also helps, if you can avoid the people that's asking questions just to get a rise out of you, like why are you eating differently? Especially if they already know. And if that you get caught in a situation like that, if somebody does bring it up, a good strategy is to have some one-liners in place, right? To keep the conversation short and it doesn't leave that opening to keeping the discussion going in the event that they're already being difficult and trying to cause a hard time for you. So we do have some good lines here, and some of these I stole from some of my coworkers, Vic, Tia, Amy. We've all had some good one-liners in social situation, and a couple of them are, I had to do this lifestyle to avoid medication, or my doctor recommended I eat this way to get healthier. I needed to make change in the foods I was eating. And one of the best ones is I don't feel well when I eat these foods, but it can be anything. You know your family and friends and coworkers better than anybody else. So just kind of preparing what you think they're going to come at you with and preparing some one-liners or just something to say, to get people off your back. That's a key. So definitely identify all these problem people, places, time, situations, and foods. And that way it's going to help you defend against anything that can kind of throw you off your path. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I know Dr. Cho talked about this yesterday, and I do think it's important to understand hunger and satiety and the hunger hormones that get overstimulated when you're eating a higher carb diet. So I want to just touch on them a little bit here. And those main ones are ghrelin, leptin, and insulin. So, like Dr. Tro told you yesterday, the ghrelin, this hormone kind of stimulates the appetite. It increases your food intake and it promotes fat storage. And when you eat foods that are high in carbs and sugar that don't have many nutrients, these levels stay pretty high and it keeps you eating more and more often. So a lot that you're taking in is getting stored, and especially all the stuff that you don't use. And just touch on insulin real quick, as we described before, when you eat a higher carb meal, your insulin spikes, causing your blood sugar to crash a few hours later, causing you to be hungry again and, seeking out rewarding foods. And I know Dr. Tro uses a great example of, what this is. When I first started working with him, I'd heard him say this a few times that um, this is going to drive you to eat no matter what. And he says you could literally fill your stomach with rocks, but when your blood sugar crashes, you're going to be hungry again, despite how full your stomach is. You're going to find a way to eat more. And I want to touch a little bit on leptin. And this is basically a hormone in the brain that signals that you're full and to stop eating. And when you're eating sugary and refined carbs, your brain can actually shut down those leptin receptors. And this is why we often eat beyond satiety, especially when we're eating those rewarding foods, because by the time that signal kicks in, we've already gone overboard on all of them. So it's very important to understand that there's other things that can affect these hormones too, such as bad night's sleep, stress, sometimes even exercise. So it's a good idea to try and make sure you get good quality sleep, find a way to manage stress, with things such as exercise, meditation, or just any other kind of activities you enjoy to kind of keep these hunger hormones in check. All right, and here we have food rewards. So, our brains are hardwired to eat and seek out a fat and carb combination. Dr. Tro pointed out yesterday with the 50-50 combination. I remember when he said, asked everybody to put their problem foods in the chat. Like we were all the same. Like everybody was typing in the same 4 or 5 foods over and over, and every one of those was a 50-50 combination of fat and carbs. And there's a couple studies out there that um, kind of bring this to life. And one of them's the Yale Food Addiction Scale. And again, they're pretty eye-opening, and they show us exactly kind of what we're up against, which is that our brains are constantly under attack for seeking out these rewarding foods. And I don't think we shared this yesterday, but the Yale Food Addiction Scale, the first thing we discuss, when we meet with somebody for the first time is the Yale Food Addiction Scale. Every year they compile a list of the most addictive foods in America, and they do that from questionnaires asking people about the foods that they have the most troubles with. And they also examine like the eating behaviors around these foods. And when you look at this top 10 list, we see a very similar pattern. It's that 50-50 fat and carb combination. And I think just about everybody in here yesterday when Dr. Tro asked that question, we probably covered these top 10, and it was just over and over and over. And there's another one that is interesting too, kind of backs up everything that we see on the Yale Food Addiction Scale, and it was a monetary value study. And what happened here is researchers hooked up people to a functional MRI machine, and they were measuring the reward centers of the brain. So they would flash picture of a food at people one at a time, and they asked if they would pay $1, $2, or $5 for this food while measuring the reward centers on the functional MRI. And it kind of confirmed everything we saw on the Yale Food Addiction Scale. So what they did is they'd show people a picture of a carb alone, like bread, pasta, maybe a plain potato. They'd ask if they would pay $1, $2, or $5. And for those particular foods, most people said $1. And on the functional MRI, it showed little to no activity showing up in that reward center. And then they would show them a fat alone like butter, cheese, or oil. And again, people said they pay $1, and there was little to no activity showing up in the reward center, just showing the fat alone. But then they would show the fat and carb combination. So they'd show like bread and butter, macaroni and cheese, French fries, and then people were saying they were willing to pay $5 for it, and the reward centers were lighting up like slot machines on the functional MRI. So I said this study, along with the Yale Food Addiction Scale, really proves that it is the fat and carb combination that we seek, especially when we're, kind of seeking that rewarding food. And one thing I want to talk about as we're on this subject is something called sensory specific satiety. And this is when you feel full and you stop eating when flavors are similar. but you stay hungry and keep eating when the flavors and the textures are different. And that's why we see so many new products in the grocery stores and on the menu options at restaurants. They want to hit as many taste profiles as they can to keep you eating. And I like to think of it as like that's why every restaurant they want to start you off with like a sweet drink and an appetizer. Then that entree has got a different taste and texture profile than the appetizer. And then they come back to it at the end, trying to sell you dessert, which is a little, also a different taste and texture profile than the entree and the appetizer. And they've literally tested this by studying people at buffets and people with a variety of options. They they found that if you have different tastes, textures, and colors, you'll literally eat 50 to 100 times more than a buffet with just a couple food options that has similar taste profiles. And again, this is why the food companies they hire the food scientists so they can keep creating these different taste profiles for the brands that we're already hooked on. And the important thing to understand is that this isn't a signal that goes away. Every animal and human has it, and it doesn't matter what diet you do. That's why it's so important to be aware of sensory specific satiety on low carb too, because if you eat steak and vegetables until you're full and you eat some more steak and vegetables if you get hungry later, you're likely going to eat a lot less steak and vegetables than if you change it up with something else that was like sweet or crunchy, like a prepackaged keto dessert, berries, cream, or nuts, or something like that. So it's definitely something to be aware of. And the past couple sessions, we've talked a lot about how to identify the problem people, places, time, situations, and food, and how to prepare for our worst days so we can stay on track and make these lifestyles easier without relying on willpower. And we want to show you a way to apply all this information that you're going to be gathering. And we like to use something we call the Swiss cheese model of defense to show you how to do that. So this is our Swiss cheese model of defense, and we're going to start right up at the top. And the first defense, we have here is awareness. And we've been talking about um, we're wanting you to build awareness, and a big part of this is thinking about and writing down those vulnerabilities and the problem people, places, time, situations, and foods that we've been discussing. We want you to be aware and understand those hunger, cravings, vulnerabilities, and those drives to eat and what's causing them, because this information is very key in the first line when putting defenses in place and making them strong so you can have the best chance of surviving any situation. So moving on, the next defense is preparation. Once you've developed that awareness of the problem areas, now it's time to prepare for them. So making every place you struggle, like your home, your work, your car, anywhere else, safe, you know, make it safe by replacing those high carb foods with lower carb alternatives. So, you can eat on your terms and survive a stressful or an unprepared situation. And we have a lot of bases covered in the app. If you check that out, we've got like dining on the go, eating out at restaurants. So we do have a lot of those bases covered for fast food and all the places like that and the restaurants. And just in case if it's work or something you just want to keep in your purse or your car or something like that, we also have replacement ideas for just about anything you could need. So I would definitely check out that portion of our app. It's actually like a cheat sheet in your pocket for anything that can throw you off. So moving on, the the next defense is self-advocacy. And this is, when you need to ask yourself why. And why are you here? What is your motivation for doing this? Is it for health? Are you just looking to lose a little bit of weight or a lot of weight? What is your driver for this change that you're making? And, this is a situation where you may need to lean on your why. Because sometimes, you may have slipped up a little, or maybe you're facing some peer pressure to eat or drink something that doesn't fit your goals. And these are the moments, you may need to speak up for yourself. And sometimes your why may help you find that voice you need to speak up and, just advocate for yourself and get you through that situation. And the next defense we have is, that community and support. You know, excuse me. We do have a built-in community and support already with the app, and a lot of the message boards for different groups. But we also even have one for this group just getting started. But honestly, you can't have enough. So we do encourage you to recruit family, friends, coworkers, anybody that can relate to you, anyone you can lean on. Just let them know what you're doing and let them know that you may need to call on them for support at some point. Because, you don't want to go through this alone. You don't have to go through this alone. So don't be afraid to be upfront with the people closest to you. And especially in your home, people in your home, um, don't be afraid to tell them exactly what you need from them to help you make this successful. And, don't be afraid to tell them what they can do to help you. And that goes a long way. And believe me, I know it may sound a little intimidating, but a lot of times, a lot of these people I've asked you to reach out for support and lean on, they're probably more than willing to help you out. And it usually goes over a lot better than people anticipate. And, we're going to go next down here to impulse control, right? And, when things do get overwhelming or you get caught off guard, we like to say make sure you have a pre-planned way to fail. And to do this, best thing you can do in that moment is just kind of eat as much low carb food as it takes and just live to fight another day. You know, if that doesn't happen, usually our first instinct is to beat ourselves up, tell ourselves we should have done better, or maybe we should have been able to willpower our way through it. And next thing you know, we get caught up in that shame and blame, and we don't really look at the real reason we struggled, which brings us to the last defense, which is tenacity. And tenacity, that's when all of our defenses do fall short. And instead of beating yourself up, we want you to forgive yourself and get back on track as soon as you can because what happened happened. It's in the past, and really there's no reason to keep, going any longer. So don't fall into that all or nothing thinking of, I blew it. I might as well start back tomorrow or next week because when you do that, that's a very slippery slope and that could spiral out of control pretty quick. So instead, have some grace for yourself. And the best thing you can do is turn the slip up into a win by asking yourself, what happened? Where did it happen? What time did it happen? What kind of foods did I cave to? And then just pull this out and go back over your defenses and figure out, where it went wrong and think of some strategies you can put in place for the next time because you're going to go through situations, you're going to go through slip ups. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. So, you need to know that this is a lifelong learning process and it's going to be trial and error. And that's how they should be treated. So I like to say, look at it as a learning experience and not a fail, because when you look at it as a fail, that usually leads to bad things. Stress is, one of the most overlooked things that we need to know about. And stress is the number one cause of going off plan and regain, here in the clinic. And, like I just said, we all deal with it in one way, shape, or form, right? So, but we need to kind of understand and know how does it affect hunger and cause the regain. So regardless if it's, you know, physiological, physical, or emotional, it causes quite a few hormone responses that cause these shifts in our blood sugar. And your body can go into a fight or flight response. So your blood sugar rises to deal with that stress. And we like to compare it to the fight or flight, or running away from danger. Because during the danger or that event you're running away from, you're not hungry, you're not thinking about food. But a few hours later, when you're out of that situation and you're safe and everything starts to calm down, the blood sugar falls and your brain's going to be on fire for food at that point. And this is why many people have the nighttime eating issues, because oftentimes the stress you carry from the day, which it may be from work or everyday life, it starts to come down around the evening time when you're away from that situation and trying to relax. So along with, causing all these issues that activate the reward centers of the brain, stress can also cause that willpower to be weaker and making it even harder to stay on track. Now, we're going to touch a little bit on some of the side effects of, carnivore and some of the other approaches we had talked about. And I know some of them are, a little like, we're going to talk about constipation here, right? So, the first, first things first. So the primary approach here, the troubleshooting, some side effects on carnivore is to increase hydration and electrolytes. And that means making sure you're getting enough sodium. So around 1 to 2 grams per day, and getting in some moderate potassium, usually under 1 gram. This the magnesium can help with that as well. So anywhere from 200 to 400 milligrams daily. But remember, this can vary depending on how much you sweat and your activity level. And the next thing you may want to do if you're experiencing some constipation is look at your macros. So fat should make up at least 60% of those total calories that you're taking in. And protein should stay about 2 to 3 grams per kilogram of, your ideal body weight. So too much protein can sometimes slow things down digestively. Also, be careful with the calcium supplements, because sometimes they can actually worsen constipation. Finally, remember that your gut needs time to adapt. So if you're switching to a low carb or carnivore lifestyle, it can take up to 2 to 4 weeks for your digestion to adapt and settle. So I'd say just, in the first 2 to 4 weeks, be patient, stick with the plan. And then, if constipation persists, despite any of these adjustments we talked about, it could be signal something that we may have to tweak, the hydration, the electrolytes, the fat intake a little bit further. But this framework gets most people moving again in the right direction. And, just the opposite of that, is one of the side effects is diarrhea. So, first slowly increase that fat intake. Jumping um, into the fat too fast can actually overwhelm the digestive system. So definitely consider like some digestive support, you know, things like some biosupplements, some enzymes. These things can help your body break down the fat more efficiently. Then think about food sensitivities. Dairy or certain foods could be triggering your systems, so it's worth checking out. So I would say if you are experiencing some of those food sensitivities with dairy, you can also experiment with some fermented foods like some A2 yogurt or kefir, or some gentler fats like avocado, pumpkin, and squash. These can be easier on the gut and they can help normalize all that digestion issues that we may be experiencing. So, like anything with any dietary change, take it slow, be methodical with it, and give your system time to adapt. And this is one I know a lot of us deal with when we doesn't matter if you're switching to carnivore, low carb, keto. We'll call it the carnivore flu for this one, but you know why is it called carnivore flu, right? And it's just because it does honestly feel like you have a flu or a bad cold. So if you're experiencing this, first off, rest and again give your body time to adapt. Most people see this resolve in a few days. Sometimes it can be 2 to 3 weeks. And electrolytes are really key here. So again, aim for those 1 to 2 grams of sodium, under 1 gram of potassium, and 2 to 400 milligrams of magnesium. But remember, this varies again depending on your sweating, your activity, and the individual. And finally, if your appetite starts to feel too suppressed, don't be afraid to increase the calories a bit. Your body may just need more energy to get through this transition, or maybe you started a new routine or something. But definitely patience here is everything. Your body will adjust, and usually the symptoms fade. And then when they don't, that's when we kind of reference back to some of these things here that can help get things moving again. Another one is ongoing fatigue. So if you're feeling ongoing fatigue on a carnivore or a low carb plan, there's a few things to check. First, you may need to increase your calorie intake, especially if you're doing, one MAD or or very low meal frequency. Then you want to look at the fat to protein ratio, kind of aim for that 1 to 1 or 2 to 1 grams. And fat is your primary fuel, so definitely don't skimp on that. Some people, benefit from trialing small additions like raw honey, dairy, berries. And this can be helpful sometimes, but it's mainly if you are very athletic or very active. So sometimes that can help people in those situations. But finally, focus on those nutrient dense foods like bone broth, liver, seafood, eggs, in addition to your red meat, because these help fill any of the micronutrient gaps that Dr. Tro talked about yesterday, and they're also going to help support your energy levels. All right, so we got muscle cramps and weakness, and if you're experiencing these on carnivore low carb, it usually comes down to electrolytes most of the time. So start by increasing the electrolytes throughout the day. For example, I've seen active clients who need up to 5 of the element packets a day or some other form of electrolytes just to keep things balanced. And next consider the magnesium, which can help prevent cramps and it can support muscle function as if you're really active. Also, including potassium-rich foods like salmon, beef, organ meats, these can help, maintain proper, muscle function and kind of keep things balanced as well. And a quick tip, if you drink water and are instantly run into the bathroom, you likely need more sodium to help your body, retain that water and keep those electrolytes balanced. All right, so now we're going to get to elevated cholesterol. So if your cholesterol comes back high, we don't want you to panic. We want you to kind of look at the full picture. So, first, Dr. Trost talked about it. Consider getting a CAC, and, hopefully you can get a advanced lipid panel to understand what's really happening. And you got to ask yourself too, are other health markers improving? Sometimes LDL goes up, but HDL, triglycerides, inflammation markers, and some other metabolic health numbers are moving in the right direction, even though some other ones aren't. And remember, don't overreact to a single lab draw. LDL often rises during weight loss, and it tends to come down once your weight stabilizes. So I would say, focus on the trends, not the single numbers. And, definitely work with your healthcare provider to interpret, all the results and these things that we're talking about here. All right, yeah, so now we're going to go into sleep a little bit. So if your sleep is off while you're following low carb carnivore, you might want to consider some of these things. Nutrition at night. So increase fat intake. Sometimes increasing the fat intake in the evening, it can help protein, maybe you need to keep that a little bit lower. Um, that, lowering that fat, it helps keep you satiated and support that blood sugar overnight. And electrolytes before bed, a little sodium, potassium, magnesium can help your body relax and prevent those nighttime wake ups. Definitely, look at the calories as well. If you're under eating, your body may raise cortisol, and that's going to make it harder to sleep. So definitely make sure you're getting enough to eat. Can't stress this one enough. Get sunlight first thing in the morning if you can. That's going to help, set that circadian rhythm and reduce that, if you can, reduce that blue light at night from your phones and TV. I know that's one of the hardest ones to do, but very important. So, just overall, your sleep hygiene, consistent bedtime, dark room, cool temperatures, minimizing distractions, these things go a long way into improving your health. Sorry, guys, apologize that the slides are kind of coming in a couple seconds after I flip it, but looks like, now we're going to talk about this one Dr. Laura usually takes, but during the
Yeah, I'm
menstrual
here.
cycles.
I can
You want to take
cover it,
that one?
Brian. Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Just an FYI, like to be careful if you are pre-menopausal or perimenopausal, um, that you can have hormone fluctuations that may cause that create different energy needs, right? So a lot of fasting, or if your appetite is really suppressed on carnivore, um, it and very rarely can lead to irregularities in menstrual cycle. For the overwhelming majority, particularly only lean, very, very lean women. But a meta-analysis just this week, literally just came out this week, showed that a low-carb diet, ketogenic diet, actually improves menstrual cycles, particularly in women with PCOS. But it was only in women who had a BMI over 25. So what does this mean? It means that if you're leaner and you're doing carnivore and your appetite is suppressed, you may be you may be eating too little, and it could disrupt your menstrual cycle. So if you see these, you may have to make some adjustments. Um, a great book is Fast Like a Girl by Mindy Pels. You can read that. I think does a great job of sort of talking about how to modify this, particularly for young and leaner women who may need a ketogenic diet for, let's say, migraines, like my wife. or let's say seizures or PCOS or other issues. Oh yeah, this is another one. If so, so another issue that we've seen with and this is actually for higher protein diet. This is mainly for men. If you notice that your libido is coming down, it could be that the protein is too high and the total energy is way too low. So, just realize that the fat and cholesterol is the building block for our sex hormones, and there's plenty of studies, interventional studies, showing that when you go low carb and high fat, your your stress, your testosterone goes up. But when you go low carb and high protein, that while you may lose more weight initially, your sex hormones, particularly testosterone, may come down. Okay, so if you notice, and again, it's particularly in those lean individuals. So if you notice that your libido is down and you check your testosterone level, well, one, make sure your zinc level is high enough. Your zinc, magnesium, aspartate, and vitamin D levels are high. But then two, you may need to sort of moderate that fat intake, make sure it's not too low.
Well, yeah, so now I think that was the end of it, True. It came up on me quick, but
Yeah, well, we didn't do so bad. We didn't do so bad. Should we do the
oh,
questions, or you want to talk about the homework first for day two? It says week two, but we mean day two.
oh yeah, I didn't know
You
didn't go there to this. But yeah,
didn't do the new one. I did the new one.
I know
It's all
I
right.
must have
Yeah,
loaded the wrong one.
it's all right.
But yeah, guys, just read, on the app, read and watch videos and that we have in the weight loss folder on glycemia and cravings, the food reward and other hunger signals, why do I always have room for dessert and stress. I'm going to post this in the on the message board. So you guys don't have to remember write this, you don't have to write it down or remember it. I'm going to be posting it here in a few minutes and you can just go over and access it that way.
Yeah, just to wrap things up, we'll take questions, guys. So just throw your questions into the chat, and we'll make sure we get them. Um, you know, uh, uh, so just if you can rewrite them, if you had them higher up, just write them again. If we didn't get to it, so I'm going to try to go back and get to all the questions, guys. Just again, I'm going to put this up here because I'm absolutely so excited about it. But we are, really, really, really excited about, um, the guidelines and how they changed. I'm very happy to see this. We worked hard to make some of these changes. I'm going to bring it up here because I think it's just that important. Very happy to see this, and certainly happy to see that healthy fats, animal fats, protein and animal proteins, full fat dairy and eggs, avocados, olive oil. These are all up here. They've removed the total fat cap, but unfortunately, they did keep a saturated fat cap. But I think that will change with further research and as they cement some scientific processes around this. We are ecstatic about it. I think this gets it right. They specifically mentioned that people with chronic disease can benefit from low carb diets. Guys, if you're recommitting to your diet right now, all the things Brian said are so important, right? Um, it's I just wanna let a lot of people, and I just heard this today, Doc, I just couldn't do it. I need to do better. I need to be better. I need more discipline. I need more willpower. And I'm never going to let stop you from making that statement. But I want you to understand if that statement doesn't lead to immediate action, it's kind of like I hate to be harsh, but it's like a fake apology. It's like saying I'm sorry when you're not sorry. You know, if you are not immediately changing something, if you're not acting, right? It's like if I get a flat tire in my car and I'm like, oh, I'm just a bad driver, I still go and fix that tire right away. I don't keep driving, right? So I don't keep going like that. I don't smash my other tires, stab my other. But when it comes to diet, we say, well, ugh, I'm just a terrible dieter. I'm not good at this. And then what do? We go back to just driving that messed up car and stabbing the other tires and smashing other windows. So it's like the worst of both worlds. You're being hard on yourself and you're not doing what you need to do. So if you're going to be hard on yourself, you have to convert that to immediate action. You have to convert it to immediate, and without immediate action, all you're doing is abusing yourself, right? So, look, yesterday was our Armenian Christmas, you know, um, whatever religion you are, talk to a counselor, talk to a religious person, talk to whoever, but just the self-forgiveness is so important and immediately put an action into place. And I thought Brian covered that pretty well. Plan for your worst day, and don't just, you know, don't just say, oh, I know I need to do better, right? That's the food talking. The food is making you not act right now. Because if it was your car, you wouldn't say, ugh, I just need to drive better. And then you would go drive with that flat tire another 3 days. You don't do that. You don't act that way. So do me a favor. If you're going to do the self-deprecation, if you're going to do the self-blame and the shame and the guilt, which I highly recommend you don't practice the self-forgiveness. I think it's very healing. But if you're going to do the self-blame, the shame, the guilt, if it doesn't lead you to immediate action, it's not helping you, right? If it doesn't lead you to immediately change, right, what you're doing, it's not helping you, right? Okay, so let's answer some of these questions. Okay, so I got a question here. Not looking for medical advice. Good, we can't give it. I'm 58 and taking oral HRT. I'm very happy to hear that. Hopefully, the we love progesterone. Certainly, a little bit of testosterone, very tiny bit of testosterone in women seems to be helpful and indicated, and certainly estrogen. I'm so happy to see that they said they made a mistake. So happy to see that. I can't give you medical advice, but there's not much differently. I think if you're on HRT, you got more of a license to fast, to be honest with you. I think you have more of a license to fast. Um, but so that's my non-medical advice. Okay. So hopefully that helps you, Elena. Linda, but if obesity truly a chronic disease, does willpower really work? It wouldn't with hypertension. Linda, it works if it's directed to the right thing. So willpower works if it's directed to the right thing. So if you use willpower to create systems to limit addictive substances, I think that works. Using willpower to pretend you can moderate addictive substances when you've struggled your entire life, I think that's a failing strategy, right? So I think willpower can work. It is finite, it does work, but what you want to do to make it long-term and sustainable is really understand where you should be directing that willpower to. Where is the best bang for my buck? Is it getting rid of addictive food? Or is it just blaming yourself and making yourself feel lousy because you can't moderate chocolate? Right? So I think that's yes, willpower works. We've been given a amazing gift to be able to use our will to sort of do what we like. But I think you have to direct it appropriately. And the problem is if you've been gaslit to counting calories and moderating addictive food your entire life, right? You're like you've been, there's an amazing study where they took fruit flies and they put them in a jar, right? They put them in a jar with a lid on it and they let those fruit flies procreate and they had several generations and the fruit flies would come up, hit the jar, hit the lid on the jar and go back down because they couldn't fly out, right? They thought they could fly out. They couldn't fly out. They came back down. They opened the jar. Several generations down, those fruit flies still flied to the top of the top of the jar and flew back down, even when they opened it. I mean, this is like an imagery that I want you to understand about learned helplessness. It is passed down. When you've been gaslit your whole life saying that you don't have willpower, I meet Fortune 500 CEOs that have amazing willpower. I was a physician, right? I was board certified. You know, I was the chief resident. I had scored on the 90th percentile. I would commit myself to studying. I had willpower, but I didn't have insight, and I was putting that willpower in the wrong place. So I'm going to tell you, I think willpower can work when it's directed at the right things. Um, I think that takes, and that's different for everybody. You know, that's different for everybody. Hopefully, Linda, that helps you. I see you had a question up here about GLP-1s, low carb diets when using GLP-1s to treat obesity. I think GLP-1s and low carb diets go better together. I wouldn't do a GLP-1 on a standard American diet. That would be a miss. You need the protein to support the muscle, in my opinion. And if you're on a GLP-1, please, please, please do resistance training to preserve that muscle. That's the most worrisome side effect for me is that if you're on it long term, over a year, definitely over 2 years, call your doctor up. And if I'm your doctor, call your doctor up. And it's reasonable to just screen the thyroid, right? Just reasonable to screen the thyroid. Take a look at the thyroid, right? Just take a look at the thyroid, a simple blood test and an ultrasound. It doesn't appear to harm the thyroid, but I think it's reasonable to screen the thyroid. This is not medical advice, personal medical advice, just general advice. So hopefully that all helps. Any other questions, guys? Oh,
Kevin,
LMNT. Why is LMNT? Yeah, LMNT is a company that I personally don't like because they, as Sarah said, they used maltodextrin and just lied about it. So they said no clean, that no dodgy ingredients, clean ingredients, and they had more maltodextrin than they had potassium in their electrolytes. So that's so I use when I want to get some extra salt, I use salty, SALTT.
I
Any
think
other
the salt
question,
tastes
y'all?
I think the salt tastes better in my opinion as well, and that's kind of a plug there, but it tastes better to me.
I'm in a complete agreement with you. I do think it tastes better. I do think it tastes better. Um, yeah, any other questions? Yeah, the grape. I like the cherry. Yep, I agree. I agree.
Yeah,
Um,
I've been scrolling up. I think you answered most of them while I was doing the slideshow.
yeah, I was trying to get in there, Brian.
You
Listen,
was in there.
everybody, have a very good night. We appreciate you all coming. If you don't have the Toward Health app, get the Toward Health app and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I won't be here. Brian will be taking over for tomorrow. And uh, I'll be in DC and hopefully I can throw up some cool pictures on the Toward Health app. So look out for those. All right,
All right, thanks
guys.
everybody.